welcome to Once a Month Stitch Nook and my desk where the creativity happens. So we're going to do another Crochet With Me video where I rant about a topic of my choice, and this one is something I care quite a bit about and something was quite triggered by a recent short I shared and the responses I got from it, as well as what those responses reminded me of some stories I have heard. So I posed a question in a short where I asked if people crocheted/knit fiber arts in public or specifically at social gatherings. And I should also qualify, which I didn't in the short because it was a short, that I'm really talking kind of casual social gatherings. So friend gatherings, things when you go to hang out. I'm not talking formal or kind of customary events like birthdays and weddings and things of that sort. Just if you feel comfortable bringing your crochet work or something for your hands to do while at a get-together. So I want to kind of dive into this. So I kind of have some things I jotted down to share, and I'm going to go over that with you. And I would love to hear all your thoughts in the comments and have this discussion go further. So crocheting and knitting have long been embedded, I think, in the rhythms of everyday life. It is not only as acts of creation, but as it's been a deeply social practice, far from being confined to just crafting circles or, solitary hobbies. The fiber arts have historically accompanied social gatherings, community events, classrooms, and even workplaces. Particularly in the United States and United Kingdom is what I focus my research on. However, in today's very screen-sensitive culture here in the US, these acts are sometimes misread as rude or disengaged, wrongly equating to scrolling on a phone, that you are really blocking off your attention. This misunderstanding reveals a deeper tension in how we define attention and participation in social life, I think. Expecting undivided focus in casual settings for long periods of time often stems from a narrow, individualistic mindset that ignores traditional communal ways of being together. Across cultures, it has long been normal and even expected for people to engage one another while simultaneously preparing meals, mending garments, or tending to daily tasks. Sociological research on secondary engagement and the anthropology of social multitasking suggests that such practices are neither inattentive nor rude, but are in fact core components of communal living. Let's delve further into it. Historically, knitting and crochet were far from isolated hobbies. They were integral to daily social rhythm across class, age, gender, and we, again, are talking especially in the United Kingdom and the United States. In the 19th and early 20th century, it was common for women to bring fiber crafts into parlors, church meetings, schools, and workspaces. For many, hands stayed busy even in moments of rest or conversation. As scholar Joanne Turney writes in The Culture of Knitting, knitting was never just about producing garments. It was part of a choreography of domestic and social life. I find that quite interesting. And then we can take cases like during World War I and II, fiber arts became explicitly patriotic and communal and encouraged. Knitting for soldiers was not just encouraged, it was a public act of solidarity. Women knitted socks in factory break rooms. So children were learning to knit in schoolrooms, and groups met not only to knit, but to build morale and sustain social networks. It was vital during that time. Knitting became part of public life that the British government's Ministry of Information even issued propaganda encouraging knitting in public as a national duty. In post-war America, knitting entered a golden age, particularly in the 1950s. It became fashionable and widespread among young girls and housewives. According to the PieceWork Magazine, teenage girls in the U.S. carried knitting to school in their satchels and used free time between classes to add a few rows. This period saw a surge in patterns aimed at young women, marketed as a way to stay stylish, industrious, and social. I think this reflects a lot of what we see in the current crochet community. Celebrity culture has also helped normalize fiber arts in the public through generations. Famous actresses such as Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe were frequently photographed knitting on film sets. They weren't isolated PR stunts either. Hepburn was known to knit between scenes as a form of focus and calm. More recently, modern icons like the Olympic gold medalist Tom Daley have brought knitting into high-profile spaces. Daley was seen knitting in the stands during Tokyo 2020 Olympics, sparking viral praise and even launching his own yarn brand. Then you have actress Zendaya, who's also mentioned knitting on set as a calming and creative outlet. And I would like to touch a bit that this isn't just uh, women that have done this. In the 13th to 17th century Europe, especially in France and Germany, knitting was male-dominated professions. We had guilds, formal associations of artisans, that regulated and trained professional knitters, most of whom were men. Apprenticeship often involved public work in marketplaces and town centers. These men were not crafting in private, their labor was visible, social, and notably respected. Men in military and maritime contexts often knit or mended clothes as part of daily life as well. During both the World Wars, soldiers were sometimes encouraged to knit to relieve stress, stay occupied, or supplement their kit. British and American soldiers frequently took knitting aboard ships during long voyages. This wasn't just survival, it became a social pastime during their downtime. Then in the US, the frontier life in the 19th century America required self-sufficiency. Some homesteaders, especially isolated men, learned to knit or crochet. Anecdotal references from letters and journals mention men darning socks or knitting while idle or socializing in cabins. As mentioned before, a notable public knitter is Tom Daley, a British Olympic diver. And he made headlines in 2021 as well for knitting during competitions and travel, turning it into a social media conversation on mindfulness and masculinity. He knits everywhere, from airplanes to press conferences. Now, in contemporary Western culture, particularly in individualistic societies like the US and the UK, there's a growing social expectation, especially in digital discourse, that full, uninterrupted attention is a marker of politeness and respect. Activities like knitting, crocheting, or doodling during conversation are sometimes interpreted as disengaged or rude, often equated with scrolling through a phone. But this view ignores the historical and cross-cultural realities of how humans actually socialize. In many collectivist societies and historically within the communities across all cultures, it has been entirely normal, even beneficial, for people to engage in conversation while also working with their hands. They might prepare food, mend clothing, shelling beans, or crafting. These shared tasks create relaxed, rhythmic environments where conversation flows more organically. The anthropologist Edward T. Hall called this polychronic time orientation, the tendency to handle multiple activities and relationships at once, a hallmark of relational cultures that value communal harmony over strict linear focus. I liked that quote as well. So I think labeling fiber arts as antisocial reflects an individualistic bias that falsely equates stillness or eye contact with being present, or it's also ignoring neurodivergent, cultural, or practical variations in how people listen and connect. In fact, for many, keeping the hands busy enhances listening and eases social pressure. As sociologist Irving Goffman noted in his work on social interaction rituals, informal conversations are rarely built on sustained mutual gaze or constant verbal feedback. People scan rooms, they prepare drinks, they stretch, they shift tasks while staying fully embedded in the social moment. That's from the Interaction Ritual, 1967. Further, cognitive psychology shows that sustained, undivided attention is not only difficult to maintain, it can be socially and emotionally draining. According to the research from American Psychological Association, attention is a limited resource, and activities that provide light, repetitive engagement, like knitting, can actually extend one's social battery by giving the brain a rhythmic anchor, reducing the social anxiety, and enhancing the conversational stamina. What some call distraction, for others is a coping tool and for a cultural norm that promotes balanced, embodied participation. Misjudging these behaviors as rude often stems from a self-centric social model that places one's desires for undivided focus above the communal or neurodiverse modes of interaction. And that's really what I want to get to. And in contrast, many forms of socializing, especially in domestic, informal, or non Western settings, they welcome layered attention. You might chop vegetables while chatting with a friend. You might fold laundry while you're on the phone or crochet while in a circle of peers. Rather than signaling disconnection, such as multitasking, can build comfort, continuity, and a deeper social ease. Now for some acknowledgement and nuance that I do recognize and want to provide in this conversation. While fiber arts can be an enriching and natural part of social interaction, that not all social settings are created equal, and I do acknowledge that. The idea that, that knitting or crocheting is always acceptable in any context overlooks the complexity of social norms, relational dynamics, and cultural expectations. Just as texting during a wedding ceremony or whispering during a theater performance would be seen as disruptive, crafting in highly formal or symbolic gatherings like weddings, funerals, milestone birthdays, or intimate toasts can be perceived as disrespectful. There are customs and cultural protocols that we have in place that we do all follow so not to trip up the flow of things. And in these moments, the acts of putting something down isn't about rejecting multitasking, it's about participating in this shared ritual of attention that honors a person or event. Similarly, in close personal relationships, expectations around attention and presence are shaped not only by the culture and society, but also by the individual emotional needs and love languages. One person in a couple might find it calm and build connection through crocheting during a shared movie experience, while their partner might feel distant or dismissed if their primary love language is touch or quality time. It doesn't make either person wrong in their feelings, but assuming that one's own mode of engagement is the standard can breed resentment or misunderstanding. And this goes back to having the idea that everyone needs to be very present and not doing anything but talking is imposing your own views of things into the situation instead of extending that grace and asking maybe the person to put down their crochet. Vice versa, that same responsibility falls on the crocheter. What's needed in these moments is not a rigid rule about what's rude or disrespectful, but rather open communication and mutual flexibility. A partner who wants undivided presence can express that need without pathologizing the other person's desire to keep their hands busy. Likewise, the person crafting can listen without defensiveness, recognizing that acts of attention are relational gestures, not just personal comforts. Respect in this context isn't about avoiding all multitasking, it's about being attuned to others and making space for shared meaning. So at its heart, this conversation points to a larger truth, that social etiquette is not fixed, it is negotiated. It lives in the space between people, where consent, context, and care determine what feels good, respectful, or connective. The same crochet project that feels rude in one setting may feel grounded and inclusive in another. Navigating this with grace means embracing both individual differences and collective sensitivity. And now I want to talk about neurodivergence, regulation, and inclusion through fiber arts. For many neurodivergent individuals, including those with autism, ADHD, sensory processing differences, and anxiety disorders, as many of us have, fiber arts like crochet and knitting are far more than just hobbies. They are essential self-regulation tools that enable rather than inhibit our social connection. While some may misinterpret crafting during conversation or events as a sign of distraction, the opposite is often true. These repetitive tactile actions help manage overwhelm, reduce anxiety, and sustain presence in a world that can be socially and sensorially intense. Research supports what countless neurodivergent voices have long said. Hand-based rhythmic tasks improve cognitive and emotional regulation. There was a 2013 study by Riley, Corkhill, and Morris published in the British Journal of Occupational Therapy, and they found that knitting significantly lowers stress and anxiety levels, with participants reporting increased calm and improved ability to focus socially. Many describe knitting as a form of meditation that helped them stay present in group settings. For autistic individuals, fiber arts can also serve a similar function to stimming or fidgeting, offering a non-disruptive outlet for nervous energy or sensory soothing. In online and real-life crafting communities, neurodivergent crafters repeatedly share that their fiber work allows them to participate in social spaces they'd otherwise avoid. One user shared, "I crochet during family dinners, not to tune out, but so I don't feel overwhelmed and have to leave early." Another commented, "Crocheting helps me stay in the room longer. It's like a social anchor." These are not exceptions, they are reflections of a broader neurodivergent experience where movement is a bridge to engagement and not a barrier. Furthermore, crochet and knitting offer predictable texture and structure, three traits known to support executive function, challenges, and sensory sensitivity. This aligns with occupational therapy findings that structured, repetitive tasks improve attentional control and self-regulation in both the neurotypical and neurodivergent populations. To dismiss or discourage crafting in social settings without understanding its purpose can be exclusionary and ableist, even if unintentionally so. I had a few comments who outright said, if you cannot give your full attention and have to bring your crocheting, just stay home. And that really bothered me. In truth, for many neurodivergent people, fiber arts do not represent withdrawal, but rather an effort to connect more fully, sustainably, and safely. I will link some of this research in the notes below. But yeah, that is kind of where I'm leaving off with this. So I was really fired up by a few of the comments, that particularly that one that said just stay home, when actually we are trying to make a better effort and are finding we are having better relationships, we're having our better practice of our social skills when we have something also to anchor us and soothe us, or for whatever it is for. So many people commented how it helped their anxiety, their ADHD, OCD. So many people with different aspects, and it works differently for all of us, but it also anchors us all together that it is doing this helpful service and enabling us to do what, to socialize when the social people are telling us it's rude. And again, there is nuance. There are certain places where we do need to put it down. It can become a crutch. But for casual settings, it is very helpful, and I have personally not encountered anyone who had an issue with it. I've always been very encouraged by people about it. But some people have had negative experiences with it. It probably depends a lot where you are, maybe some other cultural contexts that could be missing. And I would love to hear if you have some more insight into that, where you are from. But let's continue this conversation further through the comments. There was a lot of great comments on the short, but I would like to really just expand it from here. So do let me know what your experience has been, what your thoughts are, and also if you know of any other interesting research related to crochet and knitting. So that was the topic for today. I think I've talked myself out, and hopefully I'll be a little calmer after this now. I feel like I've gotten that off my chest. Thank you for indulging me and listening this far.